Good evening and welcome to the June 21st meeting of the Planning Policy Commission. Tonight we have two public hearings on our agenda. The first one is proposed rezones of areas that were, the change was facilitated by the approval of the Central Area Plan. So we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to have a public hearing on the proposed Olde Town Subarea Plan. So before that, I'm looking at my fellow commissioners, and what do we do first? We're going to do a motion on... Do I have a motion to approve the minutes in the last minute?
We don't have any minutes.
We don't have any
Because it was
meeting
just
minutes.
last week, we didn't have them.
Yeah, we don't.
For the, I know, we're not that fast.
Oh,
But
okay.
Sorry, that's why I was confused. I was like,
Okay, so we might as well just start with,
Yeah.
is it Kristen or?
Sadly, it's
Trish.
me. Welcome to our interesting new place of our meetings. Tonight we're talking about destination retail and intensive commercial rezones. The background on this topic, as Joan mentioned, was that when the ordinance for visions that you worked on was adopted, it pulled out parcels that were either zoned destination retail and some of the parcels zoned intensive commercial out of the Central Issaquah Plan area. The effective date of the ordinance gave us 90 days to figure out the zoning for those parcels that have been moved out of Central Issaquah, because those would no longer be under the jurisdictions of the Central Issaquah Development and Design Standards. So that's why we're here tonight. On June 8th, we sent over 150 letters to not only the property owners of those properties that were being removed from Central Issaquah, but also to the property owners within 300 feet of those affected parcels. And the proposal at that time was that the destination retail parcels be zoned to retail, because that was the zoning prior to the central plan being adopted. And the intensive commercial parcels would be the intensive commercial that's in the Issaquah Municipal Code. So they were the same before. It's hard to read. Since the letters went out, we've gotten a lot of really great comments from property owners in the area that had a lot of concerns with the retail zone. So staff went back to the drawing board and tried to figure out another way to transition them out of Central Issaquah and into not Central Issaquah, but to not lose out on any of the development standards that they have now. So that's part of the proposal tonight, is another administration recommendation. Just so, oh wow, it's really dark, but I don't know if you can see these parcels in gray, they're actually a darker gray, are the destination retail parcels, and the ones up here north of I-90 are the intensive commercial parcels, just so folks get an idea of what we're talking about. So option one was the option in the letter, and that was the first administration recommendation, was to take the destination retail to the previous zone, which was retail. The issues with that is it had a lower impervious surface, which would have taken away some of the development potential for the parcels. It also had larger setbacks, which would also take a little bit of the development potential. So that was option one. And this is a table that shows the differences. The smaller amounts are in yellow in the retail zone. This was the one, again, that was proposed in the letter that went to the property owners.
So Trish, since nobody
Yes.
can read that, can
Yeah,
you just actually say what that says so that we can all
I could say,
understand?
in yellow on the right, the first yellow is 40 feet. Retail allows a base height of 40 feet, where destination retail allows a base height of 48 feet. And a base height is what you're allowed without going through any permitting or doing anything extra. So they'd be losing out on 8 feet right off the bat. 65 feet is the total height in both zones, so that wasn't a problem. The next three numbers that you see under the retail proposal column are the setbacks. There's a 5-foot side setback, a 10-foot rear setback, and a 10-foot front setback, whereas in Central, there aren't any setbacks. So you can be right up to the sidewalk and right up to your property lines. So that's a bit of a difference there. The impervious surface, which is how much of your property can be either gravel, asphalt, building, all those things, roofs. For central, this zoning is 90%, and for retail, it would have gone down to 65%. So that was a bigger change as well. The second option that we came up with to try to more fit the standards that we have today in central is to take all of the bulk standards that we just talked about, the height, the setbacks, the impervious surface, take those out of central and create a new zone in the IMC, but that would have the same standards as they have now. It would not have the same central standards for parking or landscaping or tree retention, any of those, but it would have the bulk standards and the permitted use, the same permitted uses as the existing destination retail. So this was in trying to be a little bit more consistent with the zoning that they have now. And as you see, there's no yellow on the chart because everything would be the same. That's an easy one. The third option that came up while we went back to the drawing board this week was if we waited for Old Town to be done, we could zone the destination retail cultural business district because those zones are very similar. The part that's not similar is there's a real small difference in impervious surface, just 5% is different. But both zones have 0 setbacks. They're very similar, but the issue with that is we'd have to wait for council to be done with Old Town to see if council also agreed to put this area into Old Town before we could change the zone to CBD. So that was a concern. We didn't know how long we wanted to wait. The two in yellow, again, are the base height as 45 is different than the base height in destination retail is 48 right now, and the impervious surface is 85 in CBD, and it's 90 in central.
Can questions be asked or not?
In the public hearing part, it can.
About this, okay.
So, I love that. Look, there's truly a peanut gallery. I love it. So tonight, if what we think are the next steps is that PPC would have their public hearing tonight, and after the close of the hearing, you would ask questions and have a discussion. And then, if you're comfortable, you'd make a recommendation to council, and then council would review it at their Land and Shore meeting on July 5th, which is right around the corner. And then they would have their recommendation back to full council, so there could be action by August 6th, because the effective date of the Visions ordinance is the 23rd, and that's the only, as far as I know, that's the only council meeting in August, so that's the one we're shooting for to be done. Are there questions from PPC on any of this?
Why don't we listen to the public hearing first?
Okay,
Can I ask just one question?
sure.
I just want to clarify, this new proposal that's just been put up is
Mhm.
first time everyone's seeing it is right now,
Correct.
correct? Okay.
With that, I'm going to open the public meeting at 6.
And here's the list, Joan.
6:44. And the first person on the agenda is Sam Kyle. So if you come to the podium and state your name and address, please.
We haven't been to one of these for a while. Sam Kyle, 371 Northeast Gilman Boulevard is our office address. A couple of thoughts as you're thinking about things in conjunction with where you're going with this rezoning is that I don't believe that you have a master plan or a vision of the areas east of Front Street on Gilman Boulevard and what that really in the future is going to be. I don't know if there's any definitions, or I don't know that I've ever seen one. So I would suggest you give that some consideration while you're giving consideration to the rezones of these different properties. I have written and submitted a letter to the planning department and the committee and request that there's a major downzoning proposal going from destination retail to retail, as Trish just demonstrated on the map. And the intent, my understanding, the intent of retail zoning is for high visibility and pedestrian friendly orientated. I own the properties, if you look on the partial map of the submittal, it's between 38 and 55. So everything east of 3rd Avenue. So my property is highly focused on I-90 and the east fork of Issaquah Creek. And very little frontage on 3rd Avenue, and what frontage, I shouldn't say very little, but what frontage there is all faced inwards. It's faced away from, accesses to the properties are faced away from 3rd Avenue. So it's really not retail orientated in the concept of what the city has for retail. I don't have a problem with the recommendation of rezoning, and what I would support would be what they just presented to you today was option 2, where you retain the standard development standards of the density retail, where it gave the comparison. There's a comparison sheet that she brought up for you and just showed you. But if you retain those under the retail zoning, and maybe it's just an amendment for retail zoning for everything east of Gilman Boulevard or something in that aspect, and the retail zoning in the rest of the city is a little bit different. But again, going back to the plan, what are you going to do with Gilman Boulevard? You're not going to leave it the way it is. I would think that someday, you get a 100-foot right-of-way or something out there, and you come up with some kind of ideas of really what that's going to mean for the Grange and all the rest of those properties that are along there. So again, I submitted the letter and request, and after they presented the second alternative, or 2 other alternatives, I would support the middle one, whereby the rezone of retail with the destination retail development standards. Thank you.
John?
So my name's John Mabbitt. I run the Grange at 145 Northeast Gilman Boulevard. I guess what I'll do is read the comment I wrote, and then I have questions, because it sounds like there is a option that was given tonight that everybody here is only seeing for the first time. Okay. Good evening, and thank you for hearing my comment. My name's John Mabbitt, and I'm General Manager of the Grange. If I read it right, the Grange is mostly on parcels 31 and 33 on Exhibit A, map of the subject properties, which would make us a candidate for the reinstatement. And I guess I'm going to go to this actually as a question, as the reinstatement of restrictions that were wisely removed in 2013. So my question is, because the mailing I got was a little bit confusing, is the proposal to go, for the Grange to go from destination retail to retail?
That was the proposal until we went back and tried to figure out a different way to figure out the new zone.
Okay, so I can only comment on what I've seen.
Right.
Okay. I'm here to ask that you leave our designation destination retail. We are, like our neighbors Boehm's Chocolate, the definition of a destination retail. Boehm's offers the best chocolates in America, and we are one of the only fuel stations in the state who offer all 3 grades of ethanol-free fuel. Sidebar, ethanol comes from corn and is bad for all engines. The only reason it's still in use is directly tied to the Iowa caucus, but that's another story. The particularly troubling restrictions for us with changing our zoning to the restrictive setbacks, the old ones, are the nearly 30% reduction in our impervious surface, and to kind of a lesser extent, the building height. We need more barns, we're busy, but I think that the building heights are within that. But it feels like we're telling a feed store, which is us, we have 50 trucks of 50 feet or more come on property every week, and to tell us we need less impervious surface is, I think, like, telling a swimming pool maker they need to put in more sidewalks. We have major deliveries all week long, every day, of very large trucks. Some of them actually have struck our buildings, and we've got an area behind the Grange that we would like to pave to make for more parking, and also put in a demonstration rain garden kind of in the back middle of the property. The Grange is greener than ever. We actually recycle at this point at a rate that's the envy of ag co-ops across the country. So I guess what I'm saying is, on behalf of our friends at Boehm's and us folks at the Grange, in a time when online retailing daily reaches further and further into our cash registers, don't you be the committee and/or council that chooses to make things harder for local legacy businesses. We're doing pretty doggone well at the Grange. We have a community room that has classes every week. We did $10 million last year, $5 million of that in fuel, the rest in lawn and garden and all the other things we sell. We've given more to downtown Issaquah and to Issaquah's schools and churches and nonprofits in these last 2 years than the Grange did ever previous. We sell more gallons of our ethanol-free fuel records over the last 15 years. So we're thriving and doing well, and we want to remodel and we want to do well, and I think it would be helped if the restrictions of destination retail were left in place, and I think I can also speak for Boehm's, because Tyson and I talked this week, if we'd be grandfathered in or something like that. And that's it. Do you have any questions for us? No? Okay.
Unless you guys do.
Thank you.
Jeff Person? Jeff Sullivan.
I'm not Jeff, I'm Melinda.
So, you're both on there, so.
Hi. I want to thank you guys for allowing us to speak. I didn't send a letter this week because I knew I was going to come speak, but I certainly will put it in writing this week. My name is Melinda Person. My husband Jeff and I own the property located at number 11 on Exhibit B, and actually we're this little guy right here, 235 Northeast Juniper Street, which is intensive commercial under the current zoning. Between the two of us, we own 3 businesses in the city of Issaquah and currently employ a total of 20 people. We also own 2 properties within the city, this commercial property and our home, which is also within the city limits. We feel we are the exact type of people the city would like to attract. We have positive small businesses that hire good people and provide good paying jobs. We pay taxes, are good neighbors, and volunteer within our community. However, this proposed zoning change feels if we and our assets are a bit under attack. We purchased this property in 2015 when it was already zoned in the Central Issaquah Plan. My husband's company had been renting it for a few years prior, and we were aware of the change when it happened. The location is good for his business with quick access to I-90, and there's very little intensive commercial property left in Issaquah, and it's even more rare to find one that comes on the market because they are really rare and hard to come by. In fact, his company has been in business for 40 years this year, and the majority of those years have been here in Issaquah. There were several years in the late 90s to the 2000s that the company relocated to Kirkland due to being displaced by the prior development within the city and the extension of Maple Street to the west. We were able to return the business to Issaquah when this property came up for lease, and it's our intention to keep the business here. We don't want to have to move our business again. It's difficult, it's costly, and we actually love Issaquah. We purchased the property under the current Central Issaquah Plan zoning. We understood that when we were ready to develop the property in this future, we would be able to utilize 90% of the property for impervious surfaces. It's imperative to his business as they have many service and work vehicles that require a great deal of parking. With sewer available within very close distance, it made a good investment as we would be able to improve the property to our future needs. With the proposed change to 65% of the property to be allowed to be impervious surface, we are losing 25% of our usable area and taking a significant blow to our overall property value as well. This feels like a taking of our property and property rights and our personal assets. We are well aware of the future master plan development of the lakeside property, which will be adjacent to the neighborhood in question. We are hopeful that this potential rezoning is not part of an unspoken agenda tied to the development or an attempt to expand this current city of Issaquah maintenance yard, which is adjacent to our property at a reduced cost in the future. Since we are only able to operate within tiny slivers of intensive commercial zoning within Issaquah, we feel this could push our business and operations outside of the city. Since our combined 3 businesses and our 2 properties all pay a good amount of taxes to the city, if this change is to be approved, we feel that the city is no longer working in the best interest of its good business owners and citizens. So if the Planning Commission here was able to provide a solution like Plan B that you were providing for the commercial, for the retail, that would be more than acceptable. What we're trying to do is protect our asset, and we put a lot of money into this asset. And for this Planning Commission to take away the use of 25% of it, the potential for us to build on that, to do what we need to do for our business, and or sell it in the future has completely reduced the value of what we could do with that property. And it's a small lot, so we don't have a lot of space, to work with within that. So, I mean, we would be accepting, we would love to see something that's similar with what you're offering for retail, for Plan B for retail. But, we have, at this point, we've engaged counsel and, we're looking at what our options are legally because we can't lose 25% of the value of our property. Okay, I'm done.
You were standing in front
Melinda.
when you pointed out which, I'm sorry, Linda. Which,
Oh, wait, right here.
okay, thank you.
So, for example, this is Cadman, and this is Lakeside. And right here, when you come into the neighborhood, one of the car dealerships is putting a car dealership right there where there's a creek and everything else. The creek's a long way from our property. So, but, we have all this very intensive around us, but we're gonna be reduced to 65% of the use of our lot. It makes absolutely no sense. The pawn shop is across the street. They're paved from side to side. They have no non-impervious surface. So, it's kind of crazy to us that this would be where we are when we made this investment, knowing that we could do this now. So, it's painful. I got this letter and I was sick to my stomach. So,
Tom,
any other questions?
Tom, I can't read your right, Huffnagel?
Hi, my name is Tom Huffnagel, and my wife and I own this property here, so we're basically neighbors, I'm finding out here. That's right. So I thought when I read this, they were saying they weren't going to change it to go down, that it was staying the same, or did I misread this letter that it was sent to me a couple weeks ago?
The original proposal was that the zoning would go down.
Oh, because I thought it said intensive commercial, and it was part of the Issaquah one, but it was going to go to is it the King County one, or what? So.
It's a different part of the Issaquah code, but your impervious surface does go down in the other code when you're not in central.
And what's considered, I guess, when I look at this map, I know this is Gilman here, but what is going up then? Nothing. Everything's being decreased?
Right.
Because we have 2 businesses on there right now that lease from us, that use up every square inch of the lot, and I'm trying to understand.
Right. Nothing would change unless you tried to change the building or if you do something else. But what you have now is fine.
Okay.
We wouldn't make you take it down or make you change it as you just exist now.
Okay,
Right.
can you explain to me which chart on here applies to me so I can understand where I'm at and where they want to go towards?
Right. It would be the
Of this-
intensive commercial chart.
Is that Exhibit C?
Intensive commercial, yes, so it's going from this one to this one, is the proposal.
So let's see.
So from 48 feet to 40 feet base.
That's the height of any
Yes,
building?
And then the setbacks go from 0 to 10 to 10.
And build,
2 line goes from 0 to 10. And impervious goes from 9% to 65%.
oh my God, now I understand what you guys are saying. Jesus, that's insane. My God, like she said, this is all intensive commercial here. This is not some parks or anything area. It's a pretty rough-looking area.
The pawn shop is next to it.
Yeah, for God's sakes, you should see the number of cars flying in next to us there. It's absolutely unreal. And so to cut down the space there for intensive commercial is just amazing to me to think that.
Your property value has just decreased by.
That also. So I'm trying to understand what's the thinking here, other than we all want to have this big green field everywhere and no commercial, but it's not reality.
It's just moving you out of the central part of the city where the council wanted all the jobs and housing to be focused, these areas they thought were on the outskirts, so they thought it should go back to the original zoning before central. But
Even
that's
with-
why we're here tonight, is to hear concerns, and so maybe they would change their mind because you've come forward.
When you say outside, like she said, Cadman, gravel, and Lakeside, I mean,
They're already outside. They weren't ever part of central.
so do they have these same restrictions on them? Only 65% impervious?
No, they have a development agreement. They, which is a whole different set of regulations.
So what does it take to get into something like their end? You have to negotiate with the city for that, or how does that work?
Right, and you have to have a big piece of property that, so you can give different benefits like affordable housing and traffic. It's a whole different way of working out your regulations.
So tell me how Lakeside Sand and Gravel is giving more low-income housing, you said? I mean, it's a huge gravel pit with a concrete.
Right, they have housing though that, that is part of their master plan for the next 20 or 30 years, has housing and that kind of thing in it.
When they finish excavating all the gravel, their plans are to redo it to put in some housing. So it's all part of a long process.
Okay.
That's incredible, because I know somebody that actually works there, and they said they stopped digging out gravel years ago. All they do is they break down gravel there they bring from outside, and then mix the cement and then bring it out to sites. So, I mean, they're not even digging the hillside anymore.
Okay, so we're not really talking about that, we're concerned about your piece of property.
Right. What I'm trying to understand, they're my next door neighbor, I'm up against their property, and their properties are back of our property line. We're neighbors.
The city is divided into zones, and each zone has their own codes, rules, and regulations
Okay.
based on certain things.
So I'm going to just add a little clarification. So Lakeside has a development plan that they have approved through the city. It's only on the hillside back above that goes all the way up to the highlands.
Okay.
The valley floor, where their current asphalt plant is,
Yeah.
that's going to continue likely for the next 100 years, according to them.
I think so, too.
Cadman and Lakeside, there's no changes, no plan changes, and all the stuff that they got approved is really the quarry area up back behind their asphalt business.
Okay, and since you're saying the part where they do the concrete part, which is flat and level like our lot, and we're neighbors back to back,
Right.
why would we not be part of that? I mean, and I understand what you're saying, you have zones, but I mean, we're all in the same, what I would call the armpit of Issaquah, all industrial section here. I mean, this is not a parkland area or anything like that. This is hardcore, intensive commercial, everything going in there.
We're going to debate that this evening. We're going to have some conversation
Okay.
about, and whatever we agree to on the planning policy will go to several committee of the council, and then it will go to the council. So there's going to be a lot of discussion. It's not going to end tonight.
Okay,
So we appreciate your comments as well as your neighbors. I mean, that's what a public open house is, public comment is supposed to be. We're supposed to listen to people out there in the community and how it affects them. A lot of times when you're sitting in an office and you think this is a great idea, you're not really seeing all of the things that happen because of it. And as a homeowner, property owner, you can be able to tell us what you think is going to happen. So,
I
thank
have
you.
the same response as the man from the Grange, that if you grandfathered businesses that are there, that would be fine. I mean, and new properties, that they would understand that's what's going on. But to switch midstream, that is incredible. I mean, I can't understand how anybody would say, that's a great idea. We're simply going to take, huh? Okay, thanks.
Steve, Perea.
Hi, Steve Pereira, 170 Northeast Dogwood Street for about 10 years.
Speak louder. No, it's on. You don't have
Okay,
to touch it.
so Steve Pereira, 170 Northeast Dogwood Street for about 10 years. I'm one of those folks that got the letter about the development. So I guess my perspective is twofold. One is originally this Old Route 10 was proposed to be its own separate neighborhood, and now it's being proposed to be part of the Old Town neighborhood. And I haven't really heard strong reasons for each of the proposed amendments why, and why not just keep it as its own neighborhood, why put it in part of the Old Town neighborhood. I think that's a relevant discussion to have before deciding to include it conceptually. Putting that aside, the old Route 10 from the Gilman backwards before you get to the part of the lots where these industrial zones that they've talked about, like Triple X and the Grange and Boehm's Chocolate, seem really to be distinct areas and kind of our park-like settings and different than the areas, the industrials, the office buildings that are set beside. I'm one of those who favor retaining a less impervious surface allowances to protect the idea that those businesses one day are going to be sold if we intensify the development ability. I can, specifically, I'd like to see the ideas of preserving against those three businesses specifically. I'm a strong proponent of them. We're going to lose that area, and it seems something distinct. I haven't really seen a vision that talks about maintaining that different. Maybe it is indeed worth taking a look at, maybe as a previous speaker talked about, maybe those should be zoned, those office areas should be zoned differently and not part of that area because they seem a little bit different. But I would be in favor of the lower impervious surfaces and lower height restrictions, and put a vision forward that says this is what we want the neighborhood to be, and to enforce that going forward. If that includes something like a CBD district to maintain those businesses, I think that'd be a preferred option. Thank you.
Catherine.
Good evening. My name is Catherine Stickle, and my husband and I and son live at 440 Northeast Birch Street, which is actually on two houses next to each other right here on the east fork of the creek. Directly behind our house is Remax, the building there, so if you can kind of figure out where we're at. So it's, continue on down, they're on the street. So I did get the letter in the mail, two of them, and obviously not a business. Actually, we own a couple of businesses, but not businesses right directly in Issaquah. I needed to come and educate myself and learn about how this may affect us as homeowners in our area. So I had a couple of questions that I'm going to ask because I'm trying to understand all this. And the first is in Exhibit C, where you talk about parking requirements and landscaping requirements. See the Issaquah Municipal Code. So how are they different? Okay, specifically in the landscaping requirements, because there are trees behind us. We're on the creek. Then there's, land and trees, and they mostly in this time of year provide nice foliage coverage to the building that we face on the creek. So in the winter, it's much visible. But my concern is, how does this, if you change the zoning, affect the landscape requirements and the tree retention? That's one of my concerns. Number two, on Exhibit B, on the maps, it is map 15, that's that parcel there. So it talks about, then again, landscaping and tree retention is being affected. So as a homeowner, I'm sure I'm not the only one along the creek, along Birch Street, that could be concerned about, are the trees all being torn down and then all of a sudden having, depending on what kind of development and commercial, the proposed destination retail or the retail that you're planning on or looking towards in the future. So those are my questions. So I don't know if you have an answer for me or if you can answer either one of those.
Generally, the parking requirements in Central are lower, and there's a cap on them, on the parking standards in Central. Out of Central, you're allowed to have more parking, and there's not a cap on it.
Right, and that's kind of what I was assuming when you didn't specify, because you compared everything, but you didn't compare, or didn't.
Right, because everything, for those are very different. It's not just a number like height and that. Landscaping, if you're talking about trees and shrubs that are right on the creek, that would be, I would think, in part of the critical areas. So that is the same regulations in Central as in the IMC, I believe.
Okay.
But we'd have to look, because all the parcels are different, on what
Right.
it would be. And we're happy to talk to you if you come
Okay.
in to.
And I will do that. It just, I can't see RE/MAX doing anything else with their building right now, but who knows?
Right,
If
right.
they decide to continue improvement down that road, there could be an effect on us
Right.
as homeowners. And not only effect on us, but on our property values, because of the view there. And third, what this just got me thinking about, if you see, this is 3rd Street right here, and there has been, the city council and the community has had a number of discussions and public meetings and that about expanding that road for traffic issues and putting a bridge over. We have a walking bridge right there. And so there has been some talk last year, quite a bit of talk about widening that road, diverting traffic off of Sunset to help with traffic congestion. Now, it doesn't make sense at all to most people that look at that. But I'm thinking, all right, if you're doing rezoning in all of this area, and it's going to change the retail, is this not maybe an ulterior motive to say, oh, well, now we're going to have to widen the street and really come through with the bridge in our little quiet community over here in Old Town in order to feed these businesses? So that's, again, another one of my concerns. Okay? And I would love to come in and talk to you about the answers to those questions. So thank you.
Does anybody else want to make a comment? One second.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, we went to the other location by the police station, so we kind of ran here a little abruptly. But my name is Tyson Garbajuk. I am the business owner of Bohm's Candies at 255 Northeast Gilman Boulevard. I'm also a resident of Issaquah, living on the plateau. A little about Bohm's, if some of you may know. We've been in business for 76 years, 62 in Issaquah. We're family owned, and we all live locally. My father, myself, and my sister. We employ a few thousand people over those 62 years in Issaquah, including many high school students who get their first job at Bohm's. We have literally probably a couple hundred people coming during this time, summertime, every year, every summer day, on tour buses that come through. So we not only have hopefully local people, but we also have people coming from Eastern Washington and all around the country. We're very proud to be part of this community for many years. I personally have been there for 25 years. My father has been there for 46 years, and my sister also 20 years. My reason for being here, because I have chocolate and parenting duties, is because of the note that I received. Basically, this is an important thing for us for Bohm's Candies. We face many challenges being a small business. Obviously, online sales, higher property taxes. We have a hard time finding employees these days, and just the hard cost of being a brick and mortar operation. For us to be sustainable in the long term, we will have to make improvements to our property. Being removed from the central area, we will lose some of these opportunities that we previously had, and we will be faced with lower building heights, greater setbacks, and a much lower impervious surface threshold. At this time, we have no plans to change anything, but we need to have that flexibility in order for us to survive and hopefully make it to 100 years. The replacement regulations will really impact how our business is operating. It feels like a threat to our long-term viability. So we've heard a little bit about possibly an Old Town designation, and that is something that is possibly intriguing too. But by the note that we were sent, the changes were pretty big and would really hurt our possibility to remain there for years. We actually haven't done any major change since 1991, but a lot has changed in Issaquah, obviously, since 91, and it's changing faster than ever. So I guess we're interested in hearing more. We would like the city staff and the PPC to reach out to us because we really like to have more of a dialogue. I know that the Grange and possibly XXX and some other people down on our end of Gilman Boulevard are all happy to be there. We all have strong businesses that I think really make up what Issaquah, or the old Issaquah from when I was a kid, is important. And we would like to remain there, and we're asking for just the city and the PPC to work with us and listen to us so that we can remain there. But from the letter that I'm coming here about today, that's a very difficult thing for us to swallow and work with. So thank you much for your time.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to speak?
My name is Geraldine Carey, and I live at 955 17th Avenue, Northwest Issaquah. I've been here 40 years, and the businesses that are speaking tonight, I've patronized them for 40 years. I appreciate them. I love the Grange. I think that if you do anything to impact their viability, I think it would be very, very damaging to the city. In the past 40 years, I think the heart and soul of Issaquah has gone down. I'm pretty distraught at what I see going on with Issaquah. The Grange has been here forever. It's a good business. It meets a lot of needs. And I'm here basically because I sort of feel like you're letting all these big box companies come in and you're trying to squash the small people who have been here with all the restrictions. So I hope that you start looking at the design and the practices that you are implementing to not let all these businesses that are nationwide come in and take out the small independent people who have been the life and soul of this community. And I just see more boxy buildings, more people, no improvements to roads or anything. And, that corner of Gilman is an important part of our community. And I hope you support not changing and restricting those people from doing business. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak?
So my name's Connie Marsh, and I live on Squawk Mountain. And the Central Issaquah Plan covered a tremendous area and was very unwieldy and difficult to manage for the city. And so when PPC and community members that attended went through the process, it didn't seem like these two areas of Issaquah fit the super high density living with mixed use underneath it concept that generally is the Central Issaquah area. Now, for me, I can see a future for these two areas that changes them for the better and makes viable businesses and allows everyone to expand. It's just the city is not at that point. They sort of envisioned them within the Central Issaquah lens and then said, oh, boy, that doesn't quite fit, so they popped them out. But there isn't really a plan in place to get you the vision that you want and need for your businesses. So it seems like this is one of those shocking moments where everybody says, oh no, crisis is going to happen. And what I see is finally we're getting y'all to a meeting where you're going to come to more meetings and you're going to have a great dialogue with the city to get the neighborhoods that you need and want that will make the city as a whole better. And sometimes it takes that shock and anger and fury to get people even to a meeting. And I see y'all here, bonus. And it's horrible that it's that way, but otherwise nobody comes. So a pathway to the future for PPC, because you all have to make sort of a decision here, is could you mandate a process for these neighborhoods? Now that we've taken them out, now let's bring them in and say, we have an interim set of rules, and then we immediately, and now the department that has to handle this might faint, but we will immediately go into a planning situation for these neighborhoods where they can engage and get the right set of rules for each of the neighborhoods. And so then you would be assured that you wouldn't be just dropped off the edge of the cliff and these will be the rules forever. It would be within a year, you would have a new set of rules that you would be able to talk about and compromise on, right? And potentially, I know you're shaking your head, it's not ideal. Everything should be right and in its place. I will say something that you might not get. The impervious surface standard isn't real in the central Issaquah plan because you still have to do your landscaping and you still have, so you are not looking at a 25% reduction. You are looking at a reduction, but not so much. So if you can, if you would support that kind of language, I could see PPC supporting such a thing. And so oddly, I'm finding myself trying to split the difference and find a pathway to success. So that's just so out of my character. Usually I'm the fuming person up here, so I'm shocked.
Okay, well, I have one more short comment that somebody wants to make.
Sam Kyle again. I'd like the commission to also give consideration to the parking issues and under the development standards by retaining the development standards on the destination retail. Parking is a critical factor. Small businesses are the backbone to this community, and we house nothing but small businesses throughout. And under the destination retail, it allows us to design underground parking to keep it out from underneath and visible and everything else. So we used to have like a 4 per thousand, and the city keeps wanting to drop it down to 2 per thousand or something like that. So just keep in mind, just for your information, that this property, this is all of my property down here, and we're as isolated from Issaquah as you can get back in that corner. There is absolutely no bus traffic. Traffic goes down on Front Street some, but there's no bus traffic or any way to get there. So the only way people get out to our properties are, along with everybody out in that area, is by car. So keep that in mind and when you're doing your planning. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any comments?
Can I make another short one too?
You know, it's a public hearing and we need all your comments, so sure. Short.
Short, promise. Again, I just want to reiterate what a lot of the business owners have here. So I'm in this lot right here. I'm talking about cutting it from 90% down to 65% for the impervious. And again, this is all industrial, everything. I mean, even the city of Issaquah has these two lots full of trucks and everything. And I can see them having to expand that in the future. The city's growing. So I can't see how you could not have these grow in the future and need the space in every direction. And so to suddenly pick up these little ones in between all of this commercial up here, not commercial, lakeside and gravel and the other one, that one's called, and the city of Issaquah alone here, and then to pick us out and say, no, you guys need to go from 90% down to 65%. Doesn't make sense. Now, if this was a park area, I'd say, maybe I can understand where you're going, but industrial, I can't even emphasize that enough. This is totally all businesses in here, and to cut you down that far, it's just, that doesn't make sense. So, and I totally feel for these guys. I shop at the Grange because there's no ethanol in there, and tank up all of our cars there. It doesn't destroy the engine. You need some businesses that are realistic for every city. Now, it doesn't mean you want to have them with 40-foot signs on top. I agree with that. In fact, we've been approached by 2 cell companies wanting to put cell towers, and we said, no, we don't want that. We don't think that's a good thing. We're concerned how that would look, the effect on people.
So we're going to have that discussion later on this
Oh,
year.
okay.
So.
Well, to give you an idea, so it's not like we don't care about Issaquah, it's just
Right.
that don't
Okay.
take away what it is, because the two
Okay, we got it.
businesses that rent from us, I mean, they work really hard 6 days a week, and if
Okay.
you're used to this kind of stuff, can't see what the city's
Okay,
planning is.
so, anybody else? So I'm going to close the public hearing at 7:26 and open it up for general comment.
Joan,
Joy.
do you mind putting back on the board options A, B? So B is to keep the same. A is what we had seen before. I'm curious what specifically what the CBD standards are, which I believe are 85 instead of 65. Is that correct as far as impervious surface goes?
Correct.
So I'm curious how staff would feel about, right now we have this proposal of C and extending C through to what was formerly the industrial. And instead of being 65%, we did 85%. So right now there's an option to do that for retail. Right now we're changing from destination retail to retail. And one of our options is to do C, which is the CBD standards, which is an 85% impervious. I'm curious if staff considered doing that option as well for what is
For industrial?
Yeah.
No, we hadn't thought of another option for intensive commercial, but if we did, I would imagine that it would be the same as just pulling the impervious surface and the heights over from central and changing the existing IC zone to be consistent with the central intensive commercial zone. But it doesn't fit anything else in the cultural and business district to be up there. It's sort of the opposite of that. But that if we were going to have an option, and I'm checking with my boss, but I would imagine that would be an option that you guys could come up with, similar to the option we came up with for destination retail, is to keep the height, impervious surface and all those, and just bring those pieces into the other code to make them consistent for the change.
And the reasons that we had for this change of 65 was that when we were looking at this area as being a gateway, we were wanting it to be able to kind of encourage the development of the creek. We were wanting to see something in these areas as a gateway, and that was part of what drove these numbers.
No, then the old numbers have been there for forever. They were the numbers in the retail. It was these numbers before Central Issaquah was created in 2013. Other questions for staff, or discuss amongst yourself?
So I have a couple of questions here. Let's start with intensive commercial to commercial. If intensive commercial was be downzoned to commercial, then what would that do for the parking?
Okay, the parking, as I said, for Central is lower. There's a lower requirement, and it has a cap on it. So it has not only a lower to begin with, but it has a cap on how many parking spaces you can have.
Okay.
If you're not in Central, there's no cap, and it's not a minimum. You can have more parking if you're not in Central.
Okay, so let's just focus on the commercial versus intensive commercial district for this conversation at the moment. If we rezone to commercial.
You're saying, you mean intensive commercial?
Intensive
but the
commercial,
other
right.
one,
Okay, so these properties are being removed from the CIP, they're going into intensive commercial.
Mhm.
Their impervious surface would go up, but their parking restrictions would go down.
No, their impervious goes down, and their parking actually goes up. They're
Okay.
allowed more parking.
So they're gaining something and there's something being taken away.
I guess it depends how you look at it, because even with a lower impervious surface ratio, even though they could have more parking, they still have to get it on the lot. But they've now have less impervious surface to work that extra parking if they might want extra parking.
So why are we, I understand why we want to take it out of the CIP, but why do we need to change the zoning?
Because the regulations for the Central Issaquah Development and Design Standards would no longer regulate the area, so they couldn't be underneath that code because they're no longer in the plan. So we had to move them out.
Right, okay, so could that be a subset? Would it make sense to create a subset of the CIP
Well,
for these properties only?
Well, what we talked about, our option 2 for destination retail is pulling the bulk standard, the setbacks height, those, and pulling them into the other code so that they're consistent, which is, I think, what you're saying. But that's option 2 for destination retail, and perhaps you all could say to do the same thing for intensive commercial, to pull them out, create a new one that has the same standards of height, setbacks, all those, and have that live in the other code, so that they don't have a change.
They would have their own vision.
They could in the future, but we're not talking about vision tonight. We're talking about zoning.
Right. I understand that, but basically
Okay.
they would have, we would create a zone specifically for them. It would be packaged to the same standards that they have today in terms of the parking, in terms of the impervious surfaces and so on.
Not the parking.
So can I maybe add
Sure.
something? So one of the things this is feeling very condensed because of the timeline that was created through a different action. We got the 90 days, which unfortunately allowed us enough time to send out postcards to notify property owners, but there really has not been a whole lot of time for this dialogue to happen, which is happening basically here tonight. And what we're finding out is what the property owners are concerned about. And there's some obvious ones, right? So obvious is impervious surface. I think that's a thread that's running through everybody's comments. Some have talked about land uses. We've talked about whether or not there's some land use changes through this process. Part of it's building heights, part of it's setbacks. And so those are your base zoning things, right? Bulk height, location of buildings, and land uses. And so, those things I don't think are a surprise, as I'm listening to the conversation and things like parking. So in Central, the reason why the parking standards were reduced is because we believed there was going to be transit, it was walkable, it was bikeable, and so part of what we're talking about for both the IC neighborhood and for the end of Gilman is they really, as you heard from Mr. Kyle, they really don't have bus service. It is a drivable destination, as is the Grange, for the most part. We're going to try and help walkability and other things, but that is how most of their customers get there. So reducing the parking or allowing the Central lower parking standards now outside of Central, I don't know that makes sense. And I think if that's really important to the property owners, I think we're going to have to enter into a dialogue about, help me understand why that makes sense. Because I don't know why that makes sense, because most of it's going to be car oriented. Pulling them out of Central now, they don't have a limit on the number of parking spaces that they can have on their property. They can have as many as they feel comfortable with. And so that takes them back to what they had before they were brought into Central, which the whole idea is it's more walkable, it's more bikeable, less reliance on automobiles. All right? So as we talk about that in trees, the tree retention requirements are more stringent outside of Central because, in Central it's denser. And the idea was that if you were developing your property, you could remove more trees through that process. So there's actually, I would say, a smidge more protection being outside. And if somebody said that wasn't fair, that was a taking, or they felt like that was an infringement, I'd want to understand why that makes sense, because that doesn't make sense to me. So when we're talking about changes, I think we're mostly talking about impervious surface and building heights and setbacks, because those really affect how much of your property you can develop. And if there were decisions made over the last 5 years because of what was allowed in Central, and those are now changing, I think what we wanted to hear was, okay, what do the property owners, what does the affected community feel about that? And is there a way that we can maybe find that space where what's happening is going to not be an impact for them? And that's why I think you saw some new alternatives, at least for destination retail. I think the question for the IC zone is, would the administration be willing to just basically change the impervious limit in the IC zone from 65 to something higher than that, whether it's 90 or what, we talk about that. Because right now, impervious is really a function of stormwater. And stormwater, because stormwater runoff used to be a serious problem for the city, because we had to handle the stormwater runoff. Nowadays, it's less of a problem. We have much better storm facilities in our city than when those 65 used to be prevalent everywhere. And one of the things that you heard from Old Town, and as part of our doubleheader tonight when we talk about Old Town, 65 was the impervious standard for Old Town. And the Old Town Task Force basically said, why do we have this antiquated standard for impervious? Let's allow it to get higher so we can do more with our property. So that's a theme that you're hearing from folks that are about to potentially go backwards 10 years in code. You heard that same thing come out of the the Old Town Task Force, Vitality Task Force. So that impervious limit, and one of the things, if ultimately, and frankly, I think this whole conversation needs a lot more baking. So, if the commission wants the administration to continue dialogue with the property owners to come up with a more specific recommendation for the commission's consideration, I think we're willing to do that. But that's your guys' call on whether you want that to happen tonight. So hopefully that's helpful in pointing us in a direction.
Yeah, where I was going with this was that it sounds like if we move these organizations out of commercial into intensive commercial.
We have to move them out of central. So that's a decision already made by the council.
Right. So if we move them out of central and we put them into destination retail and into intensive commercial, but we keep the impervious surface requirements and allow the parking, then there is a major win for these organizations. So if we're going to give them these options, and it sounds like for the betterment of the community, we need to have some sort of negotiation with these organizations to say, all right, so you're actually going to get all these extra things potentially, so let's make some compromises on where we can find an agreement.
You could do that. I think part of what we're trying to do is take something that exists, either so the choices that I think Trish put up earlier. There were 3 choices for destination retail, and I think we could have a parallel conversation about IC, but let's start with destination retail. The choices were, to basically take 3 things that exist already and choose one of those 3. Those 3 things are, one is retail, right? That's a choice. The second is take destination retail from central Issaquah, pull it out so that they can be that on the outside. And then the third choice would be CBD. So the options that the administration put forward were pick one of 3 choices that already exist, not create a new choice. Now for intensive commercial, I think there's really only 2 choices. There's, there's kind of one. Well, there's 2. So there's one which is take it out and make it IC, which there already is an IC, but that has a significant change in impervious, as we've heard from the property owners, and I would agree with. So the question is would there be a recommendation to modify the existing IC to change the impervious to a different percentage than 65?
And then parking too, because now they will have higher parking, right? So it sounds like...
So they could have, so the code allows for more parking spaces on the property.
Right.
Once it's outside of central, because there's no cap.
So my point here is that maybe they don't need as much pervious surface, but they'd rather have more parking. So maybe we give up impervious surface and give them more parking, or we reduce the parking and give them more pervious surface.
I think you need the impervious surface to do the parking.
Well, and then you also have building height. And then you have setbacks. So we're giving up a lot of these. There's an opportunity here, I think, for a middle ground that would be great for everyone here, but there's a lot of room to be negotiated. I think this definitely needs to be baked through, because if we're going to give up, they're going to be giving up setbacks, impervious surface, but
So I guess, so
That's kinda where I'm-
so maybe look at it through this lens, Ron. What we've heard from was a number of property owners that ask for their standards to stay the same. And I think what you should ask yourself is, okay, if we did that, is there a way we can get them there? If the commission wanted to get them there, is there a way we can get them there? I think the answer is yes. And the question is does that, for either of those two parts of the city, and we did our tour, so I know you've at least driven around through those areas, do those existing standards that they have now, would they be a problem if they built to those standards? I mean, and if your answer is yes, you think that's too dense or too much, then your comment that you made earlier about we should look at some hybrid, that's something we can definitely do. But if them building a 48-foot tall building instead of a 40-foot tall building doesn't make a big difference from a community perspective standpoint, then maybe it's good the way it is. I think that's what you guys are thinking about right now is what they had in Central. I think what we said is these areas don't really feel like Central, but their standards are to some extent, when they were in Central, less than like Gilman and the mixed use areas. And so I think the question is, if they were to redevelop, what would be too much if there is a too much?
we have the right option, we have the left option, but what if they want something in between that would be a better fit for them and a better fit for the community? Because maybe they don't need all the things that are in the CIP, but maybe they also don't want to lose everything by going out of the CIP. So there's attributes from both sides that they say, boy, you know what, this is a great opportunity. We would really like to keep this, but we can give this up over here and we create our own standard.
We could do that.
The only thing I have, my biggest problem with this whole thing is consistency. It was one way, and then you decided to go into something else. And the owners of these properties are making decisions for the future based on what it is. And to pull the rug out from under them, I have a problem with that. That to me, just doesn't work. And so I certainly don't want them to go down. I think either option 2 or the third one that was provided work. There might be some areas in there that might need tweaking just to make sure that everybody is happy. But I think from what I heard tonight that most of them would agree to either one of them, as long as as long as there was enough parking and enough trees and those kinds of things. But the major thing is impervious surface, and those are that's what is causing all this consternation. So unless you have a lot of notes.
I know it's why, that's how I listen, but can I make a comment though? Thank you. So this is my first planning policy meeting tonight, and I did my best to get some of the history on this so that I kind of understood where it was coming from. But one, I just want to say I think it's wonderful. And Connie, regardless of what got people here, they're here, so I'm excited. But I'm really glad that everyone did come out and share how they were feeling, because that's a critical part of this process. And then I do have to say I was really impressed with how staff very quickly responded to community feedback that's been flooding in and showed up tonight with another option. That was really proactive. I do have to say, from a process standpoint, nobody had seen it until just tonight. So I do think it's slightly unfair in the process to, in the perfect world, ask anyone to make a decision on that. I mean, people came with comments prepared for things that they saw in the packet. But from what I'm hearing, from what people have said in the audience, that if you can please keep it the same as it is, that's fine. call it whatever you want. It sounds like we're under some marching orders from a timing perspective for other things to move forward. So it seems like the option that keeps the impervious surface and the height requirements at a place that everyone feels like is the same would work. But the concern I have, or the holding place I'd put out there, is there's still this larger strategic vision issue, I think, with this section of our community, that it's very clear to me tonight we don't understand, or we're not all on the same page as to what the businesses need in that area, and what the owners in that area need, and what we as a city envision for that area, both short-term, medium-term, and long-term. And so, I look to the city and then, commissioners, you guys that have been here much longer than I, as to how do we make sure that I think that part gets addressed? Because I think it sounds like we have a quick fix for tonight if we want to do something within the schedule, but I'm more concerned about the longer term conversation of what's right. And Ron, I think what I'm hearing you say is that you don't want to give away too much right now and kind of have a give and take conversation. I think that's what I was understanding what you were trying to say. And so anyways, that's just kind of my point I'd make, is how do we make sure we hit that piece as part of this process.
I don't expect a decision this evening. I think that we need a little bit more. I just happen to like the last two, the options of making the property owners be able to do their business. Joy?
I'm not a big proponent of option B. I feel like we're kicking the can down the road. Right now, we're trying to find a new direction for these areas. We find that they're not a part of Central. We like the idea of Old Route 10 becoming a part of Old Town. And so I don't know that keeping it the same advances what we want to see happen in the future. However, I'm hearing overwhelmingly that really the impervious surfaces needs to change to 65%. And I would be a proponent of that. I like the 85% of the CBD. And so when I envision what I see for these properties, I think keeping 0 for setbacks isn't necessarily the best thing for that area. So I like keeping some of these numbers. Now, changing the base feet to me from to 40 isn't as big of a deal because the base maximum is still the same. So for that, it's a permitting issue of 8 feet, and so that concerns me a little bit less on that number. So I would be a proponent of actually making an amendment to what is effectively an option for both of these areas to basically be the numbers that have been presented to staff with a change to the impervious surface to 85% rather than the 90 versus the 65. I think that gets us something that is the intent of what we want for these areas to go without undue burden to being able to develop the properties for the future. So I think that's an interesting compromise that I would be willing to do and to move forward with tonight.
So to summarize, your suggestion would be to pull destination retail out of Central and lower the impervious to 85 to be consistent with the CBD, and for intensive commercial to change the impervious from 65 to 85.
Correct.
So that they all get 85.
And let's have a change. They're going to have setbacks are now going to be required. So there are going to be some changes from what they're at now.
So the difference between, so just to be clear, because this is geeky planning terminology, and I want to make sure at least everybody in the room's following. A setback is a mandatory minimum. So if it says 0, it means, well, 0 is a bad number because you can't get less than 0. But let's say it said 5 feet. You could put your building at 5 feet, or you could put your building at 10 feet, or you could put your building at 20 feet. Whereas a set 2 line, which is how Central works, is their set to line, like on the street frontage, is 0 because we want those buildings right at the front property line, right? But here, since it's now outside, it's a setback. So even though it's 0, they could be at 20 feet, they could be at 30 feet. You know, they could have their pumps out in front. That's not a problem. So I just want to make sure we're tracking on terminology.
I think we need to have a community outreach where these businesses come in and city staff are able to respond, listen to their feedback and respond to it and come up with a plan. I don't think we're ready to move forward with this. I don't think it can.
So in the event of a vote, you're abstaining, is what you're not able to vote on this tonight?
I wouldn't be able to vote yes on it because I think there still needs to be a lot of discussion between the property owners and the city staff, and I think there needs to be a lot more thought going into how we're going to move forward with this, because we're right, it doesn't belong into the Central Issaquah plan, but by taking it out of the Central Issaquah plan, they're going to be giving up a lot, and to your proposal, you have some good ideas there. But I think we need to hear from the landowners what they need in terms of how they want to move forward. Because maybe what we are presenting tonight, maybe they need it, maybe they don't need it. Maybe there are other things that they need instead. And I'd like to hear what that feedback is.
So Joan, if you feel the same way, then it's a moot point and this has to be tabled. We don't have the numbers.
Well, we can't vote on it because there's only 4 of us and one is, you know.
Well,
there
he's
is
saying
not.
when I asked Ron, he said he wasn't going to be abstaining, but he couldn't vote yes, so that would mean,
It wouldn't go in.
right, so. If you're feeling the same way that you'd like to table it for this discussion, then that means that we're.
I would like to, first of all, what is, give me again the time frame where this has to be decided?
It's my understanding that it has to be completed by August 23rd, and I'm not sure what kind of wiggle room there is with
And
that
when does
date.
it go
But
to services?
it would go to Land and Shore
Land and Shore.
July 5th.
So, do we have a meeting on the 28th?
We thought we did, but because of Old Town, we thought we would continue it till the 12th. But if we had to have one next week.
Well.
So we could continue this next week
Well,
and
we
still.
can continue it, but
Yeah.
the suggestion was to get some of the homeowners, I'm a realtor, what can I say?
Property owners.
The property owners together. That's a limited time to get anything done.
So my guess is if, for those folks that are sitting in this room who provided comment tonight, if we told them that they had a week to refine their ask of the city, my guess is we could do that in a week and come back to you guys and say that hopefully we could arrive at a recommendation that at least most of the property owners here in the room would be supportive of. That would be a clearer consideration for you guys.
Can I get a better map of, the transportation, the landscaping, all of the things that were discussed tonight in a form?
The code.
Yeah, the code.
What, the municipal code?
To refer back to, I know there was a comment about trees.
Right.
It was referred back to another code.
The IMC.
So could you just put them together so that, I see a disconnect here of people understanding one thing and wanting another, and maybe they're getting it, but they don't know they're getting it. And so I need a visual of a little bit better than that with some more substance in it. Can we get that?
Yes. So it's an infinite list. Not exactly, but it could be a very wieldy list. What I've heard, so just want to summarize, what I've heard is building height setbacks, impervious, parking, landscaping, tree retention. Do you want to include anything else in that comparative matrix?
No, I know that it says per Issaquah municipal.
No, I
code.
understand.
but I
You want us to unpack that and say what that
I
means?
want to know what that
Right.
is, so they can be clear on it. But then I'll ask a question of all of you. Is there, besides the things that you talked about, is there some other issue that you maybe didn't discuss or forgot about, or some issue besides transportation, parking, impervious surface, setbacks, trees, anything else that isn't addressed in here? Because I can't think of anything else.
So as a homeowner in that area that's impacted, I think we're talking about the aesthetic of the area, what it looks like, the feel of the neighborhoods, like the Grange and Mom's Chocolate and Triple X are different in character and feeling of the neighborhood. Are we talking about something that would apply just to those businesses, or to other businesses, the aesthetic of the area? When you talk about parking and all those other things, there's an aesthetic component that I think needs to be addressed.
Is it separate?
Yes.
Is it, you can use these codes and then have another thing that addresses aesthetics? Or does it have to be together?
You can't cherry pick. You have to, it's going to be in or out. So it's already out of Central.
Right.
Yeah.
If the destination retail area moves into Old Town, then some of the Old Town standards like design review will apply. That's a decision that you guys ultimately get to make a recommendation on, and the council will then make a decision on, separate from this. Right now, what we're talking about is really zoning and not design.
That's fine.
There's less design kicking it out of Central, because Central is very designed. And we added a bunch with architectural manuals and other things most recently. So that piece, that decision has kind of already been made in terms of that. Now, whether or not destination retail goes into Old Town, that would be a way to add more aesthetic influences over that area. But that's a decision not part of what we're talking about right now.
Okay.
See, and that's another component I think that a lot of these landowners don't understand is what is changing for them.
So they can come in and talk to staff and get a better understanding of that in the next 4 days, or 7 days, if that's what everybody in the room wants to have happen, or if that's what the commission wants to have happen.
So can I throw you under the bus?
Absolutely.
Could you put together a meeting for these people, so, like a set in time, and say, here's a presentation, we can do Q&A?
Absolutely. So
That way it's not everybody individually taking up all your time?
So I will do that and plus one it. So we will set up a meeting next week, like Monday or Tuesday, to do that in some afternoon. Tuesday? Yeah, because you're not here on Mondays. So like Tuesday, but then individually, if somebody wants to do it separate, they can come meet with us individually.
But just from a process standpoint, it sounds like we're marching towards having another PPC next Thursday, which means if there's a fourth option that pops out as a result of your meeting with
Right.
everyone, there's got to be time to, so we're not doing what we did tonight,
Right.
and popping it up and saying, okay, are we all good with this?
We might be hearing about it Wednesday, it sounds like.
Yeah,
I'm just putting that on the radar.
That's why,
It may only be a
Yeah,
day.
but that might be better than this.
Jamie
is all
will
I'm
give you as
saying.
much time as we can.
Yeah.
Promise. Yeah.
But I'm just saying then
Yeah.
everyone can be on board and the meeting can hopefully go smoothly on Thursday. That's my suggestion, not
That'd be
just
great.
for me.
Yeah.
I would love to have a meeting that you have 3 options and everybody can just pick one and actually finish and move on to all the other
Talking about a
things.
5-minute meeting, that would be great.
Yeah, so we are having a meeting next week, or we're not?
Sounds like now we are, Joe.
You guys need to, I think, make a motion to continue
Well, I
this.
need to know if there's,
You
Oh,
asked for
yeah.
clarifications of if we said something or if there was more that we wanted to add. And one of the things I wanted to clarify is the main part, well, one of the main pieces for our intensive commercial space for impervious surface is parking. If you look at the businesses that are on that street, we've got a trailer and boat repair shop. We have the pot shop, which is included in this. We're an HVAC company where we have 16 vans and service trucks come in every morning. Some of them are parked there overnight, but some, take their trucks home, and they come in every morning. We need the parking. There's a roofing company. There's Seacon. There's the Minuteman Press. I said the boat. There's the Southeast Glass. They're not here tonight. They weren't able to be here tonight. And there's a landscape company. These are all very intensive parking, work vehicle places. So one of the reasons we need the impervious surface is the parking. So going to 2 parking spots per 1,000 square feet is really going to undermine what intensive commercial is all about. And that was the comment that I wanted to make. And the other thing I was going to say is, if you're looking for people that know what we're, I think the group here knows that 65% impervious surface doesn't work for us, and I think that you could get a consensus from everybody tonight that 85 or 90% would be completely acceptable, I think, for most everybody sitting here. So
I guess if I could quick answer, Joe.
I've
the list. The list you gave is the list. You're right. That's the list. I think the one thing that I would say, and I think Tyson would agree, is that impervious surface and setback aren't any. They're the same thing to us. With everybody's got good intentions, everybody's heart's in this right place, but for a retailer, that's a land grab. So you're saying that I lose 30% of my impervious surface, or I can't develop, or I can't put asphalt on it, and if I want to build, I need to come 10 feet out. Well, we have a plan to do something with the back of the Grange right now that ends if we have a 10-foot. If we're going to put in a rainwater demonstration area, if we're going to put in pole barns to hold fire logs in the summer, if we have to come 10 feet off from the fence, that remodel goes back to the architect. So your list is accurate, but I think that both of those, impervious surface and setback, that's all the same thing. I lose 10 feet and I lose 30%.
height is less important.
I'm having a hard time understanding from the fact that we're property owners, we've had these rights. If you drive down 3rd Avenue during a business day, it's bumper to bumper with cars stacked up. If you drive down Gilman Boulevard, it's bumper to bumper with cars stacked along the road. We need the parking areas, we need the impervious surface areas. Why is it that the commission or the city wants to take away, or we can offset, we can give you this if you give us this? I mean, we already have the rights. Leave it alone.
Well, that's
a choice.
That's definitely choice. So,
May I add also to that, extending on that? A fifth option, I think, should be can you just leave the rules we had? We all, run our properties based on that, don't change the rules. We're all trying to help Issaquah in every way we can, it's reasonable. Just don't change the rules on us. And it's like somebody who bought a house and next week they said, oh yeah, you can't have houses on your property.
So just not to spend too much time there. So the rules have already changed because the council's already taken you guys out of an area. Now, that's actually not all bad news. I mean, because Central Issaquah has, so your property, if it was still in Central Issaquah, it would have architectural review associated with it. So if somebody wanted to redevelop that property, the building would have to look like a certain building type. Certain colors would be only what would be allowed. That doesn't happen now because you're not in Central. So some of this is actually easier for a property owner not to be in Central. What we're talking about is what now is going to apply to your property. And I think we're trying to have, as informed of a conversation as possible so that a decision can come out that hopefully is supportive of what you're all after. I think that's what we're after right now.
Can you come up with a fifth option? Can you just leave it the way it is?
No.
Whatever you want to call it.
No, council already took action.
Okay, but I mean, you're telling us you can negotiate on that 65%. Well, if we do that, can't we just simply say with quotations, we'll leave the rules the same, you're now designated under this name. You got to choose colors or whatever.
So city staff is willing to spend time with you all next week, and as much time as you want, as long as we, can conclude those conversations by the end of business on Tuesday, so that we can potentially get something to the commission by either end of business or early Wednesday, so that they have some time to actually think about it before we go to a Thursday extension meeting, assuming that's where the commission wants to go. And I think we're still waiting for that ultimate decision.
So is the 28th open for a meeting? before we vote to just?
Right, it's a regular meeting.
I know, but.
Is it back in this room?
Okay, so there is some discussion, and so nobody is really into, I think we all agree, but in somehow different ways.
Sure.
Of thinking about the same thing in different ways. So we need to straighten that out so that I think we all feel comfortable to send it on to services.
Absolutely. We want to make a decision that you all are comfortable with, and I think right now there's too many moving pieces.
Yeah.
Because he's got busy.
So with that, I need a motion.
I'll make a motion to move
You're
the,
picking 2 o'clock on Tuesday?
I'm asking you, because your calendar says busy.
Sure. We're-
That's those applicant meetings that don't happen.
I lost it, the meeting, but we're.
all right, so I'm going to make a motion to move the public hearing proposing. To continue
Oh,
the
no, I
public.
already closed it.
All right, so I'm going to make a motion to
We're going to table
move
the agenda item.
the agenda item, proposed rezone of parcel zone destination retail and intensive commercial outside of Central Issaquah Plan Area D to the 28th of June, 2018.
Which is my anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you very much.
Not on the record.
We'll bring flowers.
I'll second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
On your calendar, you have busy from 2 to 3. Is it really busy?
Oh, we're totally
Because we're trying to do
well,
we're trying to do the
So did
meeting
everybody,
before everybody leaves.
so let me say this. So for everybody who signed up, did you include an email address or some way for us to contact you? If so, then we will send out a time tomorrow for when we have available for a meeting somewhere here in City Hall Northwest. If that doesn't work for you, or if you want to meet with staff individually, you can send myself or Trish or Kristen an email, and we'll find time to do that outside of that Tuesday meeting.
If you can, please come to the meeting because I think it's more productive if you're all together.
My thanks to staff for continuing to address this so we get it done right. Yeah.
With a smile.
They can ask their friends, right, to come too.
Oh, absolutely.
It's an open meeting, so any other property owner that wants to come or concerned citizen would be welcome.
So since there's 2 different areas.
They're
Does that make it
no, it's the
complicated?
same. I think you guys have the same issues. I mean, so I don't know that we need to have 2 separate meetings. I think the choices are maybe a little bit different for each neighborhood, but I think they're the same issues. At least I'm hearing the same issues.
So is there a way for the meeting on Tuesday to get a better graph of the possibilities?
Yes.
Okay.
So my hope is either Trish or Kristen can do the matrix in the next, like the comparison of standards
yes,
in the next couple days.
yes.
It shouldn't
Okay.
be hard to have all the information.
Oh, no,
You just have to cut and paste and put it in there.
Okay, I think we've got a plan.
Okay. So, moving right along.
Thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you for the conversation.
Right, I know, I'm
And I think we're going to find a good outcome, hopefully.
And be sure if your email isn't on the sheet and you want
all
to
on
be
there.
contacted, that, and it's clear that we can read it.
Well, they're all on it, but I can't read them all.
Okay, so we're having trouble reading the email, so we may need to have your email address again, just to make sure that you get an answer.
Could you check?
I will check. I think I wrote yours down too.
I don't know, check.
Should we just put Keith's email up on the board?
Okay, while they're checking their penmanship. For this one, to the this is over.
I don't need to add myself, do I?
No, yeah, we're not going to be talking about that.
Yes, this part of the meeting we go. Okay, so if you want to all go over there and look at it so we can continue on to our next
Staff
agenda
has
item,
sent
that
out
would
a
be
meeting notice
awesome.
on Tuesday so that we can sit and just unpack all this stuff without the commission. And then hopefully come Thursday night.
So I find it funny that we spend so much time on something that I thought would be easy, and now we're heading into something that we've had a huge amount of input on.
About their future, and so it's not like this was the first time that we saw everybody. A lot of them came and talked to us this week. That's the whole point of the letter.
But they
But it's-
wanted to get their,
Right, but they didn't know the new way, so it's good
Yeah.
that they're now going to hear, they can think about the new options too.
okay, so we're going to continue on, Keith? Keith? Could we continue on?
And I'll be your wingman. Yeah.
So the second thing on our agenda is the Old Town Subarea Plan update.
If I go like this, is it going away? Keep going. They can't see that it went away.
Yeah. Okay, first things first. The first slide that you can't see says more to come. So things just seem to evolve. And, you know, departments continue to look at things and things come up and, some issues have come up with the plan and departments have ideas and staff has ideas on some things that need to change in Old Town. So we're trying to wrap our heads around that right now. So we are going to bring you a revised plan once we get our head wrapped around it. And that's what we'll talk about on July 12th. Okay, I can't even tell you what those things are right now. And it's not that I don't want to. It's that we need to look at it and trickle it down and get the bullet points. But we're still going to talk. Yeah, we're still going to talk.
Okay.
So there are two issues that we still need to talk about, and the first one is the Old Town boundary. So we have looked at this many times. We took a tour to help us figure out what Old Town looked like and what we wanted the boundaries to be. Oh, it's really hard to see up here. So you might be able to see the gray shading.
So Kristen, maybe go up and
Yeah.
and point at the map.
So is that bottom line Evans, Southeast Evans Street?
Yes, it is. So the gray shading here is the existing Old Town boundary. This area right here is what is Old Route 10 that used to be in Central Issaquah that has now been pulled out of Central Issaquah, and you all have discussed, I believe, agreed upon, including this as part of Old Town. The other portion, the one that we talked about at our last meeting, is south, down here, is removing the area west of Front and south of Clark, and east of Front and south of Evans, which are primarily the school. You have the high school, middle school, and elementary school, and then some single-family small lot and multifamily high is primarily what's in there. So then the new sub-area boundary would be this thick black line right there. So before we moved on, I just wanted to, is that what you all want?
And remind me now, those areas go into.
We would have to figure that out with the comprehensive plan amendments. They could likely go into either the Sycamore sub-area, which goes this way, or there's a Newport sub-area that's up here. Most likely, it would probably be the
Go to
Sycamore
Sycamore,
sub-area.
okay.
So the few homes that are in there, would their restrictions change
No,
anything?
their zoning would stay the same. Their use of state, nothing changes about what they can and can't do with their property. It just pulls it out of the Old Town sub-area and moves it into another one.
So, any comment?
Can I ask a question? And the reason for doing this, is it mostly just character fit with the Old Town area?
Right. So when we talked about it, everything else seemed to fit the Old Town grid, the Old Town character. This one, The parcels are much larger. It's schools, which have kind of different standards anyway. So yeah, just keeping the compact feel of what was the original Old Town.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Joy?
I struggled with this last meeting, and I spent some time on this, and I'm ready to back it. I really like having Old Route 10 brought into Old Town, and after actually doing another drive tour myself, it really does make sense. I hated the idea of shrinking Old Town originally, but it really is just massively taken up by land that really isn't going to be redeveloped anytime soon. So I'm a proponent of these boundary lines.
Okay.
And the other part? Are you fine with taking
With the
that?
removal, yeah, with these boundary lines as shown.
Okay. Ron?
I agree with what we're seeing here. I think adding Old Town to the, or adding the old Route 10 to Old Town is ideal, and removing the southern half that probably makes the most sense.
So, Jamie?
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah,
I'm
you
just trying to line up the map with that map. So Old Town would still include, it would not include Clark Elementary, correct?
Correct.
But it would include just north where like the hiking, where the house is, where we have, yeah.
Which?
I don't know the official name of
The
it.
which
but
one?
do you-
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, the trail.
Because
the trail
there's
house.
two historic things right there above Clark.
Right, there's the trail house.
Yes.
And, right, there are a few of them, the depot, the
Yes.
Gilman Old Town Hall. Yeah.
Yeah, so all of that's still, is it the,
It's all still in the proposed Old Town boundary.
perfect, okay. Yep.
Yeah, and I do want to point, it's really small. This
Yeah.
is slightly different from what you had in your packet. This parcel right here, it actually is one parcel, but it's hard to tell when we're looking at all of our stuff. And I looked at it today. This piece is the community center, and I didn't think you wanted to cut that out.
No,
And
yeah.
so I took this little jog here and added the community center back
Yeah.
in.
Absolutely.
Okay, didn't want to split a parcel either. So, okay.
Okay, since we all agree, can I get a,
Do we not want to wait until we see the whole package? Do you want us doing the boundary? Does that help you?
No, I'll leave it up to you.
It does help you, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would like to have a decision on something, anything. And since we all agree on this, I would like to move it forward, but I need a motion to.
You want to make the motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion that we add to the Old Town, the Old Town Plan, the revised boundary as depicted.
I'll second.
All those in
Point
favor?
of order question, if I may. Shouldn't there be community, is this part of the conversation?
Would we like to
Before
take
the
public
vote?
comment?
Oh, yeah, this is
There is
a
a
public
That's a public
hearing,
hearing.
isn't it?
Okay.
Well done, Steve. Would you like to table that motion?
Does say public hearing.
Okay, so, are you going to present more before that?
One other thing I want to talk about, and you guys, this is up to you.
Yeah.
Whether you want to talk about it or table it. So, where's my next one? Let's see. So, a few things have happened. So, the city doesn't currently have a recommendation on this, okay? 3 options have been presented to you. And then the Economic Vitality Commission, the Chamber of Commerce, and the Downtown Issaquah Association have all been notified of this. EVC had a long conversation last night. They sent us a letter, and they're kind of undecided. They want to have a longer discussion at their retreat on July 11th. So we would hear back from them and what happened at that retreat on July 12th before our PPC meeting that night on the 12th. We did receive a letter from the Chamber. I have copies of those all right here if you guys want to see it. We did receive a letter from the Chamber opposing the idea of limiting formula businesses, but there were no comments on allowing them within the character of Old Town. So it was, they said no to limiting the uses, but there was no comment on, we'd be okay with the uses if they were within the character of Old Town or fit inside existing structures. And the letter is right there. So, and then I've already mentioned the other two. So we can talk about this tonight and talk about what the options are, or we can wait until we hear a little bit more from the EVC and what they have to say.
Since I was at the chamber meeting this morning, They,
So you may be able to expand. That's what I interpreted from the letter, so.
they feel that it's derogatory, whatever, to business to limit what type of establishments actually go in there. If something goes in there that doesn't work, then it's going to go away. And so they have a hard time restricting what goes in there.
Okay.
And that's their big issue. They don't think it's legal and right to do that.
Okay.
So that's what prompted the letter, to make sure that they were on record of
Okay.
being against limiting
Okay.
it.
Just as a side note, it is legal, but.
I mean, to
but-
them, that's
Okay.
legal to them.
Okay.
To restrict.
Okay.
Or to cut down the number of businesses, or to say it's only mom and pop, or if box stores could go in, if they have box stores, a small franchise business like Safeway, not Safeway, Starbucks. Dia said that would be great to have those kinds of franchises in there. So to restrict it to the language that it is limits all franchises, all box stores.
So that's limiting it to the language of 4.5, which was the first option that was in the packet, but there were two other options. They could come in there, they would just have to comply with the standards of
Right, well, they
of
didn't-
Old
they
Town. Were
didn't
there any
see
comments on that?
the
Okay,
options.
and that's,
So that was
Right.
their main goal
Okay.
of limiting it, so.
okay, all right. So what do you want to do? Do you want to discuss this further, or do you want to wait and hear what EVC has to say?
I would like to do some discussion. I know
Okay.
we got a lot of input last week, and I think that some of the issues deserve at least a discussion
Okay.
now, so that we can eliminate them or push them on to more discussion.
Okay, so 4.5 was limiting the actual use. And essentially, it boils down to it's a franchise or chain business that has 10 or more businesses throughout the United States. And there would be some exceptions, like banks without drive-through, professional uses, grocery stores would be allowed. There would be some exceptions to that, but the idea is to limit the use. Another option was to just require anything that comes in to comply wholly with the Old Town standards, design standards. And another option was to require all new and businesses that redevelop to a certain financial amount, or it's like the assessed value. There are different ways of doing it, but they redevelop to, say, 50% of their assessed value of their property, then they have to comply. But if it's under that, they don't have to comply with the standards.
Can you explain?
Yes, so, let's see. Oh, I had them all written down on my desk, and they were beautiful. So
So
safe.
Safeway was going into where Domino's is now, and they didn't want to change anything from option B on the slide. They could just move in and they wouldn't have to do anything. But if they moved into, if a building came down, they would have to meet the standards.
Right, so let's try a different one. So,
Okay.
Home Depot wants to go into where the market used to be. Under A, they would have to meet all of the standards in Old Town. If they go into the market under scenario B, they only have to meet the standards if they redevelop or make improvements to that property that are 50%, this is an example, 50% or more of their assessed value. So if they only do make improvements that are up to 40%, they don't have to make any change. They don't have to comply with the standards.
And is that an improvement at one time? Like if they made a 20% improvement and then a year later did another 20%?
That, they can do that under the current code, under the IMC, but in Central Issaquah, there's a phasing, I think it's still there, a phasing plan, where they have to show, their plans over the next 10 years or something, and if that totals, then they have to comply. So we could apply something like that in this situation.
So that doesn't address the type of business that can go in there?
Correct. That doesn't affect the use, just what it looks like.
So the use, when we're talking about restricting the use, we haven't actually wrote that in here.
That would be
No,
4.5.
that's 4.5, the first one.
There's effectively 3 options on
Yeah.
the table.
Right.
And-
Okay. 4.5 or options A and B.
Right.
Why don't we, Joan, why don't we open this up to the public?
Yeah, I was going to wait for Ron to finish and then, are you
I'm finished, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll open the public forum at 8:25 and ask if anybody would like to speak on the park, Old Town Plan. Is there anybody that would like to speak?
Signed up, we'll go ahead and move up to the side.
You gotta set your timer. Can you do that?
So Steve Pereira, Old Town, about 10 years. So on the boundary area, again, I'd like to hear more of the vision for including the old Route 10 and what that vision and neighborhood can and should be designed. I'm glad those neighborhood businesses are going to have a chance to meet. I just think there's a wider community meeting that needs to be part of that discussion as well that hasn't happened yet. I think that same conversation needs to happen with whether or not to reduce the Old Town Subarea neighborhood area, a wider vision, why or why not. I think we need to look at not just where should we put the welcome to Old Town Issaquah sign, but where do we want that neighborhood to be? Should it be looked at for different zoning, for other things? That needs to be a discussion that happens before that gets decided, a vision of what it can or should be. Those pieces having been discussed, I did send a lot of input in writing form. I didn't want to talk about specifics. I agree with the city, though, that the current standards for height don't meet, and folks have had a lot of time to try to decide if they wanted to and had the opportunity to build by current standards. They haven't. I don't think the proposed standards, though, are what the vision for the Old Town Issaquah is and needs to be retained. 4 stories and an increase in impervious surface. I think those things are not just about code, but they're about the aesthetic of the neighborhood and the area and the vision that we can be. And I think we're changing what the people who live in that area designed and wanted it to be. I don't think this meets what the envision and the goal of the people living there is, and I'm asking you to consider lower height standards, lower density, lower impervious surfaces. Again, I think those are part of the aesthetic of the neighborhood.
Are you talking about Old Town?
I'm talking about the Old Town sub-area neighborhood. So Front Street and Sunset specifically, but it includes, I think, a wider area if you look at the whole sub-area district. Again, I don't want to talk about all the things that I've said. On the one specific piece I did talk about was the umbrella signage, and I think the couple of businesses I had thought of were restaurants, and they were advertising alcoholic products on the umbrellas. If that's allowed by city code, then I think that should be changed to not allow signage.
I don't want you to go over all of the things that you said.
I'm calling out a specific couple things. Like I said, I wasn't going to repeat everything, so. There's been a lot of chances and opportunities folks have decided not to build. I think by increasing the impervious surface, you're also changing the design and vision of something that's historic in character and has class and charm to something that isn't that anymore. So again, I think there should be more keeping in character with what the residents of those areas want, not just what the businesses want. That's a draw to the people of surrounding areas to Issaquah, not by making it the same as CIP or other areas, but keeping it different and unique. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate your interest and your detail-oriented suggestions. So is there anybody else that would like to speak on the Old Town Plan? Oh.
My name is Geraldine Carey. I live at 955 17th Avenue, Northwest Issaquah. As to the character of Old Town, a lot has changed in 40 years. It went from a quaint little farming community into this development that, just has, the city left with no heart and soul. Seems like every business that goes in, it just kind of makes it boxy. When I tried to find out what was going to go into the old Front Street Market, they told me they couldn't tell me, that all it had to do was meet certain requirements, and then that was it. And when I look at the dollar store, I think it's deplorable what we did to that area of the town. You just took away the soul and heart of that area, and I think you need to think about the people who live there. It's just, a green sign with white letters or whatever, and it has no character. When I see that sign, I think of coming up on 900 through Renton Highlands, how horrible that development looks. And if you let businesses go in, because they can afford it and they can pay, the going price, what's the Front Street going to look like? Is it just going to be, a bunch of, ticky-tacky boxes and no character? When I moved here, we had a little dress shop, we had a shoe store, we had a Ben Franklin. There was so much character to that end of town, and now, it just has no character. I'm sad about the fact that, the store, I don't even know what's called, Money Tree, Dollar Tree, or whatever. I won't patronize it. I hope everybody who sees it and is put off by it won't patronize it. I'm sad. It just, it makes Issaquah look ugly. Thank you.
Mary Lynch, I just want to comment on the process and a couple other things. One is, I think it's really a shame that the Old Town had another public hearing over at in City Hall at the same time as this one. And I think a lot of people didn't know that this was here and not at the other City Hall. So they didn't come over here. And with all the traffic in town tonight, I think some of the people just decided they're not going to listen to us anyway, so why should we come? That being said, the map that you showed up there, I couldn't find any place on the web. So do the people that are being taken out know that they're being removed? And how do they know that they're being removed to come and talk? And just like you're having meetings, as Steve said, with the businesses, I think you need to meet with those people that live down there, the HOAs and the others, and give them an idea of what's going to happen. Because one person I talked to just felt you were shoving them off again. They might as well just succeed into King County, because they have no idea what the impact of being removed from here is going to do. So you're saying it may go into Sycamore. They don't know. They don't know what the codes are. So I'm really concerned about the process and the lack of involvement. Just one other comment, as I still question whether the Dollar Tree sign fits the new city code, and that's my concern. I don't think it fits the existing sign standards, and the fact that they were allowed to just paint it over, I think, is atrocious also.
Is there anybody else that would like to make a comment?
So I popped the formula businesses up on Nextdoor to see what people had to say. And people have been opining at length in both directions. So I think it's an interesting topic of conversation, but I think it's a community conversation. It is not a Chamber of Commerce conversation or even just an Economic Vitality Committee conversation. Because as you can see, if you read Nextdoor, it's like, Jer, it's our soul, it's our community, and many cities all over the U.S. have their core areas that don't allow formula stores, or they have very rigid standards for their designs. And so it's really sort of common in certain areas. So, and then it sort of makes me laugh. I remember the first Old Town meeting where I said, wow, that that area south doesn't fit, and Steve said that area on Gilman should be in, and here we are, and we've come clear around in circles, and so now everybody agrees. I'm happy with that. We're good. So the question of how long have we been doing it? A year? 2.5. I'm sorry, 2.5 years. So how many people have been lost along the way? And sort of like I did with Gilman, do we need to actually go deliver flyers to all these people who are impacted in the area so that they actually know that things are happening to them? How do you solve that core problem of surprise and horror when things start changing in the community and they know nothing about it until the last meeting, right? I think we have next year a notification changes, noticing changes for the code. I think we need to implement something sooner than that and standardize it until we get it done. And so that would be what PPC, you guys are going to get these same people who are upset. So if you can ask for staff to figure out a system to help, it might make life easier. Yeah, I know, I'm looking at y'all, because I'll do it. I'll walk door to door. I'm not employed anymore, sort of. I swear, I will. I sort of like it. But something has got to change.
I think the first question I asked was, will anything change with those homes? And so I think if there is concern in the neighborhoods, then we haven't done our job to show them that everything in their neighborhood is going to stay exactly the same. There are going to be no more extra rules or regulations, and that there'll be no different. You can still walk from, there will be no different. It's just the designation of the area.
And it's different than taking something out of Central, because Central did have different standards, and so the standards had to change for those taken out. But Old Town and Sycamore, they have the same standards. It's all the same zoning. So the zoning doesn't change when you move out of Old Town. It stays the same as it was when it was in Old Town.
It's purely a name change.
It's a boundary change, right, but the regulations stay the same.
Yeah, well, apparently I'm hearing some things that people are concerned that there are going to be changes and more requirements and cost the money and not allow them to do certain things. And since it doesn't change, it would be wise for the city to make sure they know. I don't know if you have to go door to door, but, you know, just doing a flyer, most people don't even read it or understand it, or having a community meeting, at least you invite people I don't know, some way to get them to know that there is no change.
It's on my to-do list. Yeah, because I would agree. I don't think there's a shared understanding in the community of what it means to no longer be in Old Town. And from an emotional connection standpoint, I think a lot of people have an idea of what they think Old Town means. So if people thought they were part of it and suddenly they're not going to know, oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't change my land use at all. I don't think the average person's going to know that. So do you guys mind throwing that map up one more time? So and I might have missed it, and I didn't mention it, and maybe it's not a concern to anyone else, but I walk around town a lot, and I use our trail system a lot. The one thing we are going to lose taking that chunk out is the Rainier Trail that runs down from the community center and crosses down Second, I believe is in that section.
Right.
And I'm only pointing it out, again, I don't know if history-wise, if there was a connection of that being part of what we thought was Old Town, but I just wanted to point that out. I don't know if that's a deal or not,
Well,
but
part of it was the railroad track, but that, I believe, but that doesn't change. It's still part of the city.
yeah,
So it
I
doesn't
understand
change.
that.
And,
Yeah,
and it's zoned community facilities, and it's all part of the same trail, so it's still treated the same.
Okay. I bring it up just simply as a larger conversation, I feel like, as a city we keep having about how do we make our city walkable and bikeable, and what does that look like, and accessibility. And so I know it's just semantics, but I just, pointing out that that's, you know, that kind of system runs through. And so, again, I don't know how much we connect it to that, but that was the only other thing I had noticed. And I just wanted to clarify, is the pool still within? Or
It is,
Okay.
yes.
And then the skate park next to the community center, does the line go around that, or is it?
The skate park's moved, so it's not there anymore.
No,
but
there's
they
still a skate park
They still
there.
use it for, do they still use it for a skate park? I thought they were using it for
I mean,
something
it's
else.
kids use it. Whether it's official or not, I don't know.
And
But
where is it exactly?
On the east side of the community center, I think.
Yeah.
So it would still be in then,
okay,
yes.
okay, thank you.
Yes.
Anything else? So we obviously will table, but it is our recommendation that, that this area is now Old Town.
Okay.
Okay, and then next week, no, whenever it comes back.
Right, this will be July 12th. Right.
We can make a final decision after you talk to the neighbors.
Yes.
Okay. So we've gotten a lot of comments. Unless there's something else you want to say, I would like to go over a couple
No.
of these. I know that Keith has spent the time to answer the questions, and some of them are valid, and I'd like to go through them really quickly. So if you want to come up and take your copy of your comments.
I might need a copy.
I don't know if those are the comments.
There's piles right here. You didn't need these,
No,
or
this
what are
is-
we?
I need the one
Oh.
with the city
Yeah.
logo on it.
I don't know if they're, certainly not in order. I've moved them back and forth.
So how do you want to do this?
Just go down, I mean, some of them, you answer them. you
Sure.
get but if somebody comes and talks at a public meeting, I think they have the right to have their questions and concerns addressed, so.
Sure. So, okay. All right. So, number one, we talked about the boundary change, and I think that there was a request that the staff should be clear on the proposed boundary change and whether we support that. And so, I think what you heard this evening was that we do support the proposed boundary change and the map revision as is.
Because that was the question. Why would you, as a city, go?
What's the reasoning behind?
Yeah, the reason behind, to answer the question that was asked.
Sure. So I'm going to turn it over to my staff who led that conversation about the map change.
And why we would support the map
Yeah,
change
why
Yep.
is it
and the
good for
current
city?
boundary?
Yeah, why do you, what's the value of changing it?
I think it recognizes the original township and kind of solidifies what it was. This part to the south doesn't really have any ties. It has ties to the city with its schools and to areas outside that are within the Issaquah School District, but not necessarily to Old Town. Old Town is, it's unique. I was going to say it's tight. It's tight-knit, tight kind of,
Okay.
but yeah.
Okay. Number two.
It has to go on your, desktop.
So there's probably like 30 answers here. So you want to go through each of them individually?
I do.
Okay. Sweet.
You don't even have to read it if it's in code, we don't have to discuss it.
So part of the reason for doing a written response was so that we wouldn't have to do this.
Yeah.
And so in the future, I guess I would rather not spend 3 hours on a Sunday doing this if we're going to have to go through each of them individually. I guess my suggestion would be if the commission had questions on the responses. Now, if you have a question on every response, we'll go through every one of them. But to go through each of them individually seems,
Excessive?
yes. So I'm looking for the commission again, if the commission wants to go through all of them, we will do that for the next hour. If you would rather not do that, then I would be more than happy to go through any that you might have questions on.
Well, I don't think we've decided on some of the things. Is right now,
So would you like this back to see your
okay.
notes?
I really appreciated staff. So I appreciated Steve's comments at the previous meeting, which is part of why we wanted to continue that discussion.
Trish, can you put it up?
We're trying.
I have it here, but I can't get it there.
We did that.
Put it on the desktop. It's there.
Desktop.
If we put it on the desktop.
And I'm sure I, like everyone else, spent our weekend going through and every email that we got going through it and being able to kind of give this that time. I really liked staff's response. I think it clarified some things that, a good example would be the umbrellas. And I, specifically made a point when driving through of looking and kind of actually observing what businesses have a blank umbrella, which ones do have advertising, and trying to kind of see the balance of saying, it's a popular thing on sailboats. You often see advertising on sailboats because sails are very expensive and you have to replace them very often. There's a reason for it. And so having to mandate our businesses are blank at all times and do a code change, I don't know, something that we're wanting to do right now on a policy level. So I was able to, from getting staff's response to that, I was able to see that this is not the time or the place to kind of start parceling out some of those details. So when trying to redirect us back to the policy discussion that we're trying to have. So I appreciated the reply the staff gave us from this memo. And I appreciate the time you guys took to go through these things.
Thanks, and specifically to the umbrella issue, I think your point is right, Joy. So it's in code now, right? So it could be anywhere in the city. It could be in the Highlands. It could be in Gilman. And so if we feel like Old Town is different, and it shouldn't have advertisement for coffee or anything else on the umbrellas, then we should have that conversation. But my point was to show you that it's allowed in code now. And that then leads you guys to whether you think Old Town deserves a different treatment than the rest of the city.
It may be helpful the same way that we're looking, some very separate issues, but we're looking at the possible down zoning. And we're wanting to have a chart of saying exactly, show me what we got, show me what the options are.
Right.
It may be helpful to say, here's what is going on in Old Town, and based on these policy changes, this is now what we would have. A good example of that is Heights.
Right.
When we went around on our tour, it was easy to see, hey, what's this weird building? Oh, there was a reaction from the community from this, and we want to try to avoid this, and that was a good example. And so when we hear things like 4-story, 2-story, maybe 3-story is a good in-between kind of a thing, it might be helpful when we receive this again on July 12th to be able to see if the policy is denoting a change in what we expect the next step would be code, obviously.
Right.
What that is, and maybe that will be a clear line for people to be able to see in the community, oh, this is something I'm really opposed to, or maybe this isn't even happening the way that I thought.
Right.
So another lovely graph chart may be helpful for those kinds of details.
And some photos, I think, are also helpful to, at least capture the conversation, because, when we're sitting in the council chambers, sometimes it's hard to vision kind of really what we're talking about. So I think we're trying to get the memo out. Sorry.
I think I would have taken 10 minutes to go through the whole thing, certainly not an hour, because
I think at the speed I'm operating right now, it would have taken an hour, so.
No, I wouldn't have let you take an hour. I mean, most of them, I don't, there's no question on, but there were one or two like the umbrellas. You had put in here, PPC will discuss.
Right.
And so with that, I thought maybe you thought that there was some reason to do a little more discussion.
Well, and I think we started that, and so if you guys feel strongly about no advertisement on, so it can't advertise a business because that's a sign, right? But if it's advertising a product, that is allowed.
To me, I think it's quaint. I go into different areas of the world, and they're, it just, I don't know, to me, it seems okay. Not the businesses because of the sign code and advertising, but some of them are really just.
So another one we can talk about is building heights. Steve had suggested, I think, 2 stories on Front Street. And right now it's really 5, and kind of, so I put some photos in the memo to show you kind of some of the buildings that are definitely more than 2 now. And so the choice for you guys is, if you think 2 is the right height, we can do that. That would create some nonconformities. with what's out there that's taller than 2. Where we initially started was 4. I think one of the suggestions that Kristen alluded to earlier is I think there's a new ask to maybe go to 3. So
Is there, or did I just make that up? To me, it was a compromise between the numbers, but have you?
You didn't know it's coming. It's coming.
Yeah.
So what we talked about today doing is part of this is, this getting right that outreach piece. If you're a property owner and you can do 5 now, and you wake up tomorrow and you can do 2 or 3, that's a significant change. And so what we talked about possibly was putting something in policy level that opens up that conversation. The action steps will be clearer that that's kind of where we're heading. But, if at the end of a long or hopefully appropriate level of public outreach and conversation with the community, the answer is whether it's 2 or 3 or 4, the hope would be that we don't have to immediately go back in and change the plan. Right? And so part of, I think, what we're trying to do is figure out how to structure this in a way that the policies in the plan give us enough direction to then have those code conversations, and whatever comes out of those code conversations works for whatever policy we had in the plan. And so that's part of what we're doing now. And we're also going back, since the strategic plan has been running on its own little path for the city, and we know the at least what's likely to be the 5 focus areas or key priorities for the strategic plan, and they happen to semi-parallel what's in the Old Town plan. I mean, it's mobility and it's environment, and so one of the things that was asked of us was, you need to kind of read that and look back now, cross-check it against what's in the draft Old Town plan and see if they're talking the same language, right? And so that's another reason why, as we talked about this today, we said, we need more time. I hate to say we need more time with the Old Town plan because, as Kristen said, we've kind of had it moving for a while, but I think we're getting towards that end point where there's some kind of pretty significant, hey, look, there's the memo. So some pretty significant changes. Technology and, so the idea for this room is there was an ask to have more things televised. And so there's going to be more overlap with things happening in the city council chambers. And so we needed 2 venues. And so communications has been working hard to get this room ready for that. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting there. So be a little patient with us as we kind of get ourselves up to having 2 real televised venues. So anyway, so if you would like to go through this more methodically, we can.
No, I thought you would just, hey, we did that, this is done kind of thing. And you got to the ones where, Steve I think, received this answer
He did.
From you guys. So, but there were just a couple in there that said PPC will discuss. And
Sure. So Trish, can you scroll down till we get to the ones where the response is PPC will discuss?
In reply to the height, so it sounds like you guys are looking for kind of a compromise.
I think it might land there, just because there's been some additional conversations about height internally.
There's been talk of just, for the policy being just lower it. Don't set something, just lower it from where it is currently, and then go to the code and then have another public conversation saying, what is that?
It's right. It may be helpful too in talking about a chart of saying what do we have now and what will the policy change. It may also be helpful to say because we have Front Street and we have Sunset and they are their own situation. But it might be nice too to kind of have what are the so a reminder of, again, right next to that, what is just a block over someone able to build residentially, because we want to say, we want to keep our view corridors, but if a block over someone's going 2 more stories higher, then what are we doing? So,
and that might want to take more of a map form. You know, because what you could have is existing and then proposed, like as numerator and denominator, so that you could see in the areas like along Sunset, where we've talked about lowering that to 3, okay, what's right behind it? And is it 2? You know, because I think geographically it might make sense for you guys to see that relationship.
I'm seeing a topography map. That would be great. I think also clear up a lot of confusion and help us to know when we're making this plan.
Sure.
What are we gonna get?
Sure. Okay.
The first one that came out is electric cars.
So charging stations, you know, so that's part of the city's sustainability effort. The charging stations here at City Hall Northwest are actually almost used all the time. And I can't speak for the ones that are scattered through the rest of the city. There's some by Walgreens
I think you just answered that question,
So-
so you don't need any more. And community gardens,
community gardens are
people love
packed. They do have weeds, but it's, you know, part of it is the folks that are using them as plots are supposed to take care of them. And usually there's a waiting list. So if people don't, then they don't get plots again, and that's the way they kind of self-regulate.
probably hit them all unless you can see any other ones on there.
So you're telling me I made a bigger deal out of that than it was?
I-
All right, Susan, put that in the notes.
So I want to look at the very last one,
Does it say fiend?
because it hit me when I saw that.
Oh,
Has the ability and the authority to make any recommendations it desires. And that's true.
It is
but
true.
Seeing it in writing makes me think I have more power than I do. Anyway.
You can get excited about that last one.
So anyway, so I don't know, I know you guys have read the rest of them. Is there anything else that you want to add or discuss that's on here? I think that most of them have been, yeah.
so there's, so the next step would be we'd get you guys a red line plan and a map and maybe a matrix if that makes sense. So we'll try and get you guys the tools so that next time we have this conversation about Old Town, hopefully it'll be close to the last conversation about Old Town. But, you know, this one wants to, I want to get it right, as you guys do. So, you know, there's no real magic. We turn into a pumpkin moment like there was with the last agenda item. You know, we don't have 90 days to make a decision or else something bad happens. We have more
But I
time.
think we have to understand that it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect. You know, we can't discuss
Right.
and discuss it and discuss it, so we have to make a decision at some point.
Right.
And you know, just like in any other piece of literature in the city, you can always come back the next week and make changes to
Right.
it, so.
I think too, that a lot of times people look at Meyer down in the details, which are actually codes, so as long as we establish this baseline vision of what you want it to be, the rest of that discussion can take place during the standards discussion, which is next.
That's kind of what we did
Mhm.
in the central area.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yep.
you know, this
Yep.
is what our vision is, and this is what we expect the code to be to enforce that.
Mhm.
So I'm expecting that in Old Town, so. But we do have to get to a point. I think that it's really important to bring people in the community in. But, you know, you have this discussion, you make a kind of decision, then somebody who hasn't been in the discussions now come in. So do you start from day one, or do you, you know, continue on with what contributions you've had? So it comes, you know, there's so many things to do, and there's only 2 planners that are able to accomplish, and you, of course, but.
Oh, yeah.
So there's so many things that have to be done at the same time, so, you know, so if we can get some of these, the big pictures done, I think that's where we need to go, the city. That's just me, anyway. Ron?
So, Jamie earlier had made a comment that we may need more public outreach on the Old Town Subarea Plan of removing the boundaries. So tonight, we're supposed to make a decision.
No, it's
We're
being
not.
extended till July 12th. Yeah, it says it, but we're
Okay.
proposing.
Got it. All right, so do we want to talk about how that might look? Do we want to talk about doing an outreach plan?
Well, I think that's really
Yeah, I have it on my
up to
list
the
too,
city
Okay.
to do.
to notice them, either through letters or
So we
some
tell
other-
them what
yeah.
we want them to do.
Right, no, yeah, we're not going to go out and do that, but I wanted to ask, see
It's
if there's a
their plan, they
consensus
might
of our
have
group.
us-
Yes, you are. That's what we decided. No, but they will be. They will
Okay.
be. We just, yeah.
I'm more concerned with the one, the outreach is gonna, and the meeting is gonna happen next week with the businesses, so, and I assume that
We will let
are-
we will let you guys know as well. Just as a FYI, you're welcome to come if you want to sit in on the meetings.
Are they? Because if they
Depends
have a
how many
quorum, it
of-
has to be noticed as a public meeting.
Depends how many of us would.
Right, that's why I say if it's a quorum, then they can't.
Are we on
Okay, so
TV?
if we delegate one person to come, are we
Get a quorum for
safe?
the meetings,
I think it would be
let
s-
alone for an extra meeting.
I'd like to go. Would you like to go? Because two's okay, but, I don't know, maybe we should pick straws.
Can two go for the first hour and two go for the
Sure, switch
We'll
Yeah.
work that out.
Three and three.
I'm fine to have a representative because I would be a plus one, so I don't know that anybody wants to have that to the equation of an infant.
So we can discuss that
Okay.
offline, so to see if anybody.
So
would be
if
interested.
commission leadership wants to go, I think they could make that decision that they will represent the commission at the meeting. Because it sounded like commission leadership, the chair and the vice chair, would like to go. So that's,
Well, we have a life too, and if you pick a time that neither one of us can
Sure.
attend,
No,
we'll-
absolutely.
So we'll do this offline
Yeah.
and see what we can do, but.
Okay.
I think the most important thing is to get the people together to agree. I think they all agree.
I think they do too. I don't think that's going to be that big of a lift. I think we have to explain some stuff, but once we get there, I'm guessing we can all land at a space where we can come forward with, here's what the administration and the property owners would like to see.
For that
So, yeah.
thing. So I think the only issue that is up in the air in the Old Town is what businesses are allowed and how we structure what we think goes in there, and I don't know what the next step would be to be able to do that. You have to be open, but, you want to get a vibrant city.
Right.
Which means you have to get businesses that, as the chamber said, if it goes, something goes in there and people don't want it.
Yeah.
They're not going to support it, and it's going to leave. Of course, it's going to take you a year or 2 years to find that out, but.
Yeah. So that one's clearly the hardest one, I think. There's going to be some other changes, but whether you guys want to limit formula businesses or not, there's definitely two sides to that discussion. I don't think it's clear one way or the other.
I think we want it to be a vibrant city.
Yep.
We want people to go and be there after 5 o'clock, just to walk around and enjoy the city, especially in the summertime. And to do that, sometimes you have to have stores that bring people in, and sometimes they are formula stores. So, you have to be very careful on how you word that, so.
Or I would interject that we've gotten the opposite. We want to have a vibrant city, and by having the openness, we've gotten the opposite. There's the chains that have come in recently don't promote walkability.
No, I
And
agree.
and they do the opposite of what we're intending. And so I was disappointed to see the letters that we got. It kind of, to me, were very fear-based as far as let's let capitalism decide, and any kind of limitations are a bad idea because we want to have whatever the market can support. And I think that that's fine for Issaquah in general. For Old Town, I think we need to protect it, and I think we need to see we're bleeding and we need to stop the bleed. So I'm a fan of 4.5. I think it's needed, and I think that it's needed based on the recent things that we've seen in the community. And so to be able to kind of, when we talk about creating that future that we want, I think this is a very common thing in other areas of our country. As someone who's lived on the East Coast, it's very popular to limit formula businesses in these very historic towns. And I would like to see us really consider this rather than it just being the look of a business and have it actually have some protections. When we think about the way that a mom and a pop operate versus a national chain, it really is a difference of that money staying in our community. And I see a big difference between the money that goes in our community just being the hourly salaries that are being paid versus really an extension of all kinds of services. And so rather that going back to corporate somewhere else in another community and how that gets rolled out, I would like to see Old Town really have that look and vibe. I'm sad that we don't have the dress shop. It's a very different vibe that I think we can help protect, and I think this is a good way to do it.
So how do you put that against the rights of the property owners to decide how much profit they're going to make? If a mom and pop is willing to pay $5 a square foot and somebody else is $20, they have a right to be able to support themselves with their business. And so I think you have to be very careful on how you limit. I mean, there should be limits. I think we all agree on that, but you're going to have to really fine tune that so that you accomplish getting what you want and still protecting the business owner.
Well, and one of the very real challenges, unfortunately, is that unlike the list, I think, of some other cities that we were provided where formula businesses have been restricted, I have a feeling, without having visited all of them, that they don't necessarily look like our Front Street does at commuter times. And so I think it's just something I think that's important, that unfortunately we're in this situation. We wish we weren't, but it puts us in kind of a catch-22 a little bit of the ideal mom and pops we'd like to have there, and then the reality of what's going to do best, given the current traffic situation at certain times of the day. So I don't have an easy answer for that, but I just think that's an element that we need to think about in this conversation. And then kind of to Joy's point, and I saw it was here in 4.5, but I would like to actually even challenge the exclusions that we put forth. I mean, if we're going to go do it, I kind of say let's go do it. And, why exclude banks and grocery stores and medical services? There are a lot of great local banks still around, and there's a lot of really interesting local medical services, still around. And so I just kind of push on that a little bit. And if we are going to go that route, I kind of challenge our thinking a little bit on providing too many exclusions in there.
This is, so torn, and the reason why I think you got the proposal that you got is, if our downtown was just a tourist destination, right? You'd say all you want is little cutesy retail shops where people can come and spend their money and then go. But Front Street also serves as the retail and the service area for some neighborhoods that we're trying to keep vibrant in our community, right? So things like insurance agents and hair salons and stuff, which aren't super exciting and vibrant, but they are needed services for residential. That's why you got what you got, but it's good to talk it through because I think we were trying to think this through and figure out what kind of made sense with our particular situation. That's why we didn't just take a code from somewhere else and say the Hamptons work here. Right. It's like this was what we thought made the most sense if we were going to go there.
Yeah.
So.
So,
anything else?
Well, I was just going to ask, so July 12th are we just looking at the formula business piece, or are we looking at the whole Old Town plan?
You'll look at the whole plan again with some of the revisions that we're going to make.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll get it for
You'll get it soon.
Yeah, you'll get it with the you'll get it with the packets a week before.
Not before Tuesday.
So I
I think we're busy.
No, yeah.
Well, I just had a follow-on question then. So this was supposed to be the second public hearing, right, tied to this?
This was the third continuation of the public hearing.
Okay, yeah, all right.
Yes.
So it was the third continuation, so maybe it's a moot point then, but it sounded like with the location change.
Close the public hearing?
I don't even know, did we even open it?
Yeah. No, I opened it. Did I close? I didn't close it, right? I didn't close it.
You closed the public
So
comment,
we're
but I
gonna
don't think you closed the public
continue
hearing.
The public hearing till.
Right. July 12th.
So there is going to be one more?
Yes.
One more opportunity for
least.
the public? Okay.
Something I was supposed to do. Okay. Okay. Anything else?
No.
So we have a meeting on the 28th.
Right, you won't get your packet, you might get an agenda, but you won't get a packet. You won't
Okay.
get the guts till next week.
Are you talking about the rezones, or are you talking about
The
the?
rezones.
Yeah,
rezone.
yeah,
It would be.
probably
okay.
Wednesday.
If we could see something that was decided in that
Right.
meeting and
Mhm.
at least the plan that the formula that you're going to put together.
Because
kind
we
of
are going
thing.
to put together whatever it is, we're going to put the parking and the landscaping and the,
Yeah.
in the chart.
Okay,
so that
as long
you
as we have that, and, you know, we've heard them this evening, if there's something different that they come up with, maybe we could have a email
Yeah.
or something.
That's the intent,
But
is to
otherwise,
give you the results at
yes,
that meeting.
so we don't need
Just-
the full packet paperwork
No.
and all that stuff.
It'll be-
As
probably be a
long as we
memo.
get that part of it. Okay.
And we'll do our best as soon as we
Anything
can.
else? Anything else? Anything else from
No.
our fearless leaders?
No, it's been quite a week.
Okay, so I'm going to close the meeting at 9:11. I got it this time.